I think they're all probably various things like that. It was like something like Time Bandits was really a result of us not getting to make Brazil. And so I got very frustrated and said, all right, I'm going to make a film for all the family. And one weekend, the idea came to me of, okay, it'll be about a boy traveling through time. But I thought, well, a child won't be able to hold the film together, so let's surround him with a group of people who are the same height, so we can shoot from a child's point of view. So let's have a bunch of bandits who are child size. And that was it. It was very simple, the idea of finding heaven a boring place. And you wanted to have some excitement in your life, so you go and start robbing through time and space. And you rob in one century, then you go a few centuries before the crime was committed. Fantastic. And how that worked. Something like Baron Munchausen, I'd always loved the book, because the book of The Adventures of Baron Munchausen in the 1950s was second only to the Bible as far as a popular book. And it's been forgotten now. And so I love the idea of his adventures, so we started on that. Something like Brazil was me being incredibly angry and frustrated at what the modern world was like in 1980-something. And I just hated the world and the way terrorism was being used to create stronger states and blah, blah, blah. And so that was the result of that one. And then after Munchausen, which was a financial failure, I got very depressed and started to go to work on somebody else's script for a Hollywood studio. And again, that went to number one. and then something like 12 Monkeys was a script that nobody knew how to make. And I thought, well, that's good. If nobody knows how to do it, if I fail, I won't be compared to anybody else's attempt at it. And it was and again, it was a studio film, and the idea of getting a film with a story line like that through the studio was just an interesting adventure, because they didn't make films like that. And then other things have come along, like Parnassus. I just wanted to write something again. But it has to have an idea that is a view of the world that's fresh. Because that's the only reason to make films, as far as I'm concerned, is to sort of open windows and doors to other ways of looking at the world. And you can either agree with me or not, or you might get you inspired to do your own thing. But the films, hopefully, are the beginning of other people's adventures or creative attempts. And that's kind of it. If they're just there to entertain, that doesn't interest me. And action films are wonderful, but I don't know how to make those. So I do what I can. And I also like the idea of making films that are difficult to get made, because I want to keep proving to distributors and studios that there are really many audiences out there, and there are a lot of intelligent people that if you give them a really intelligent film, they will come, they will respond, because the studios tend to think that we're all stupid, and we just want to see, Fast and Furious 29, and Pirates of the Caribbean 110, and all those films are fine, but the idea that we just have to keep repeating the same ideas because people just want to see the same thing again and again is very depressing to me. So I would rather go against that way of thinking. Whether I'm right or wrong, it doesn't matter. It's clear the studios are more right than I am, because people keep coming to watch Fast and Furious 93. And so there you go. I was just wanting to write something fresh. And my films are always in some way autobiographical, and it was kind of the mood I was in at that time. I was having difficulty getting money for my films. I was getting depressed that nobody was actually going to see them the way they were with my earlier films. And so it was me being Dr. Parnassus and saying, here's this magic, this extraordinary world, if you have the eyes to see it. And Charles McEwen, who co-wrote Baron Munchausen with me and part of Brazil, we hadn't worked together for a long time, so it was nice just to come back together and see if we could create our own script and story. There it was.
How was working
Who's
with
this guy?
I was going to ask you, in your work, would you say that you spend a lot of energy actively trying to avoid cliche and lazy ideas, or is it rather something that comes more naturally in your creative process?
The idea of me avoiding cliches is I'm just perverse. I mean, my attitude, if everybody else is making films like this and thinking about the world like that, I want to go over here. I don't know what's over here, but it's more interesting to be over there. And I do try to avoid cliches because it's, well, they're cheating. It's easy to manipulate people with a cliche. So if I can avoid it. And sometimes when I try to do cliches, I fail. And so you think it's more interesting than it is. It's just that I tried to be cliche, and I failed. There's a lot of the work in my films is my failure to do what I really wanted to do. I mean, if I had, I was always excited by the fact that, frustrated and excited, that my failure to get the kind of films I wanted to make earlier, the big budgets and all, has at least saved me from making really mediocre movies. Because my ambition was to make really movies like everybody else made. And I keep failing at that because I can't get the money or I'm just not good enough. And then you think I'm really clever and interesting. But no, I'm really boring.
How was it like to work with Heath Ledger, and how did you manage to adapt the script to Parnassus when he died?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few problems in my, quote, career. But Heath's death was particularly just horrible because he was a really close friend. He was an extraordinary actor. I mean, there's a side of me that knows he was, without a doubt, the best actor of his generation, and he was just getting better and better. And to lose that is just horrible. When Heath died, right in the middle of Parnassus, we were in Vancouver, and Amy, my daughter, who was somewhere in the audience there, who was one of the producers on the film, said, "You've got to come into my office." And I said, "Well, I'm busy. I'm trying to save some money in the art department. Just come in." And there it was on the BBC website. Heath is dead. And it made no sense because we'd just seen him a couple of days before, and him dying was impossible. But he was dead, and so it just completely killed us. I mean, and I just said, "It's over. The film is finished. We're going home." And people like Amy and Nicola Pecorini, my cinematographer, they just kept beating me up and said, "No, you've got to solve the problem. We're going to make this film. We're going to finish this film for Heath." And it took, I don't know how long did it take, a couple of weeks before I started thinking again. 3 weeks, okay. and then the idea, because it was suggested, let's get another actor to replace Heath. And I said, "No, we're not going to do that. Number one, you couldn't get an actor that good who would be available because we had to keep working. And then it just struck me that, well, the character goes through the mirror 3 times. Let's get 3 friends." And again, Amy forced me to call Johnny Depp. And Johnny, because what was happening at that point, all the money, the bankers and everybody were leaving. They were going home because you can't finish a film when the star is dead in the middle of that. And Johnny said, "Whatever you want, I'll be there." And that, when the money people heard that, they started their retreat. They slowed down. "Oh, really?" And then we just started looking for other friends of Heath's. And Colin and Jude were friends. Because I wanted to keep it in the family and hand it to people who knew him and were doing it for the right reasons. And Colin and Jude said yes, and Johnny, we finally got Johnny on board. It's one thing for Johnny to say yes, it's another thing to organize his schedule. And it worked out, and we made the film, and when people see it, they can't imagine that it wasn't written that way. But I didn't change the script at all. It's exactly the same. And what is so disturbing is when Johnny is talking and you're seeing little boats go past with Princess Di and James Dean about living, dying young, never growing old. These were all words that were in the original script. And it was very spooky to think we had written, in a death in there without knowing it. There's even a scene in there, which I won't tell you which one it is, which we shot, and Heath is in it, but Heath was dead when we shot it. It was a couple months after he died, and nobody has spotted the scene, and he's there. So I think everybody worked very hard, and we managed to make it happen. And so for me, the film is not only one of my favorite films, but it's also the most extraordinary achievement that we managed to, out of a disaster, turn out a really wonderful film. So. And only screen tonight. Unless you make a lot of noise tonight. I'm hearing talk from the distributors that they're not going to put it out in the cinema and only do it on DVD. Yes, thank you. It's a disgrace, and we're going to burn down the city if this is what happens. Bucharest must be sacrificed. The zero theorem was, again, my default, as you know in computers, you've got your default position when you go back to things. And the default position for me is Don Quixote, foolishly, stupidly. And we were working on Don Quixote a year ago, and suddenly the money fell through. And so last July, I didn't have a job, and I was very determined that I was going to make a film that year. And the Zero Theorem was a script that had been floating around 4 or 5 years before, and I never got involved in it properly. And the producer was still interested in doing it, and so he said, yeah, let's do it. The difference was the budget 4 or 5 years ago was one price, and we ended up doing it for a third of that money, basically. And that's why we had to come to Bucharest, because Bucharest is lovely and cheap. And I really am grateful for having had a chance to come to Bucharest, because I fallen in love with this place. Anyway, the script was an odd script. It was full of good ideas and interesting aspect, personal or existential ideas, let's put it that way. And I just jumped into it, and we got a crew together, and from, I think, the 3rd week of July, I got Christoph Waltz to agree to be in it, and by October 5th, we were shooting the film. I mean, for anybody who's ever been involved in filmmaking, this is impossible to go from that point to shooting in such a short time. And I just got a lot of friends to come in and be part of the process. Matt Damon and Tilda Swinton and David Thewlis, Ben Whishaw. And it was a very, I suppose, frenetic experience because we had very little time to prepare it. We had to build this incredible chapel at Media Pro Studios. We had to get permission to shoot on the streets of Bucharest, by the bank of Mamaros, and on Cal Victoria, which isn't in the film finally, I'm sorry to say. But it was just a very fast process, which we shot in a very short time. We finished the film, and then went back to London, and it took us 9 months to finally finish the film for a variety of reasons. But it was an interesting experience where, in the editing, in many ways we kind of rewrote the movie. It always happens in editing, I move things around, but this was more interesting because we had a lot of material that was interesting itself, but it needed to be restructured to make the film work. And in the end, I think we ended up with a really fine film. And the performances are quite wonderful. Emil, are you here? Emil Hostina is in the film. He was in Dr. Parnassus. He lives in Bucharest. He is Romanian, and he's not here. And he hasn't even seen the film yet. If he had seen it, he would make a reason for not being here, maybe. But he's not. Anyway, so yeah, it was just a very interesting experience to work that way, where I didn't do storyboarding like I normally do. It was just working on instinct, and we brought in, I think, only about 4 or 5 people from outside of Romania, and everybody else was from here in Bucharest. And it was a great experience to see how hard people work here and how skilled they are and how good the meat is here. Because these are important things when you're making a film, to be with people that laugh a lot, that work very hard, and can cook. That's important.